The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of a busy courthouse in downtown Chicago, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. The air buzzed with the low hum of murmured conversations, the shuffling of papers, and the occasional echo of footsteps against marble. It was just another day in the life of Judge Richard Langley, a man known for his stern face, sharp words, and an unshakable belief in order. He sat at his bench, gavel in hand, peering down at the people before him with an expression that could freeze water. To most, he was an intimidating figure, a man who commanded respect, whether it was deserved or not. Among those waiting their turn was Maya Thompson, a young woman whose presence seemed almost out of place in the formal setting. She wore a simple yet confident outfit, her posture straight despite the weight of the situation she was about to face. Maya wasn't a lawyer or a criminal. She was a community organizer, someone who spent her days fighting for families on the brink of losing their homes. Her case revolved around protests she had led against illegal evictions in her neighborhood, actions she believed were necessary to protect the vulnerable. But today, she found herself standing in front of a judge who didn't seem interested in hearing her side of the story. As Maya waited nervously outside the courtroom, she couldn't help but feel a knot forming in her stomach. She had been warned about Judge Langley, how he had little patience for anyone who questioned authority, let alone someone like her, a black woman advocating for change. Still, she reminded herself why she was there. This wasn't just about her. It was about every family struggling to keep a roof over their heads, every child worried about where they'd sleep next. That thought gave her strength, even as the minutes ticked by and her name was called. Inside the courtroom, rows of benches filled with spectators created a sea of faces, some curious, others indifferent. Lawyers whispered to their clients, scribbling notes on yellow legal pads, while court clerks moved efficiently between tasks. At the center of it all sat Judge Langley, his gaze sweeping over the room like a hawk searching for prey. When Maya approached the stand, the atmosphere shifted slightly. There was something about her calm demeanor that caught the attention of a few observers, though no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. What started as a routine hearing quickly took a turn when Maya began explaining her reasons for protesting. Her voice was steady, her words carefully chosen to convey the urgency of her cause. She spoke about mothers working 2 jobs to make ends meet, about children being uprooted from schools they loved, about communities torn apart by greed. For a moment, it felt like the room held its breath, listening intently. But then came the reaction Maya had feared yet somehow expected. Judge Langley leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he interrupted her mid-sentence. His tone was dismissive, his words cutting. And just like that, the fragile hope Maya had carried into the courtroom began to waver, but only for a moment. Little did anyone know, the real drama was yet to come. As Maya stood before the judge, her heart raced, but her voice remained steady. She spoke with conviction, laying out the reasons behind her actions. Her words painted a vivid picture of families living paycheck to paycheck, of landlords exploiting loopholes, and of communities fighting to stay together. She explained how her protests weren't acts of rebellion, but desperate attempts to draw attention to injustices that had gone ignored for far too long. Each sentence was deliberate, each argument backed by facts she had painstakingly gathered over months of research and first-hand experience. But Judge Langley wasn't moved. If anything, he seemed annoyed. To him, this was just another case in a long line of cases, another person wasting his time, challenging the system he upheld without question. As Maya continued, his patience wore thinner with every passing second. He interrupted her mid-sentence, his deep voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Enough of this," he barked, leaning forward on his bench. His eyes locked onto hers, cold and unyielding. "Who do you think you are? You're nobody." The word hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and suffocating. Nobody. The courtroom fell silent, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. For a moment, Maya felt as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted. It wasn't just the insult, it was the dismissiveness behind it, the way he said it as if her existence didn't matter. She clenched her fists tightly at her sides, willing herself not to react. This wasn't about her pride. It was about the people counting on her to fight for them. "You don't understand," Maya replied, her voice quieter now, but still firm. "This isn't about me. It's about families who need help, people who deserve better than what they're getting." She tried to keep her tone respectful, even though anger simmered just below the surface. But Judge Langley wasn't interested in listening anymore. He waved a hand dismissively, cutting her off once again. "Save it," he snapped. "You're wasting everyone's time here. Sit down." Maya hesitated for a split second, then took her seat. Her mind raced as she processed what had just happened. How could someone in such a powerful position show so little regard for the struggles of others? She glanced around the courtroom, searching for any sign of empathy from the faces watching silently. Some looked away, uncomfortable witnesses to the exchange. Others scribbled notes or whispered among themselves, more concerned with the spectacle than the substance of the case. Unbeknownst to anyone, however, there was one person in the room who hadn't missed a single detail. Detective Sarah Collins, sitting quietly in the back row, had been observing everything. A seasoned officer with years of experience under her belt, Collins had been assigned to monitor the courthouse due to recent threats against judges. At first, she had planned to stay out of sight, blending into the background as she always did. But something about this interaction caught her attention. The judge's harsh words echoed in her ears, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, not just in his behavior toward Maya, but in the way he carried himself. Collins watched as Judge Langley fidgeted uncomfortably in his chair, his irritation evident. He shuffled papers unnecessarily, avoided eye contact with those around him, and kept glancing toward his desk drawer. Something about his body language set off alarm bells in Collins' mind. Years of training told her to trust her instincts, so she reached for her phone and discreetly began recording the scene. Whatever was happening here, she wanted evidence. After all, you never knew when a routine day might turn into something extraordinary. Meanwhile, Maya sat in stunned silence, replaying the judge's words in her head. Nobody. The label stung, but it also fueled her determination. She reminded herself why she was here: to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. And as much as Judge Langley tried to diminish her, she refused to let his words define her. What neither of them realized yet was that the real drama was only beginning. And within minutes, the tables would turn in a way no one could have predicted. Detective Sarah Collins sat in the back of the courtroom, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. She had been trained to notice things others might overlook: the slight tremor in someone's hands, the way a person shifted uncomfortably in their seat, or the flicker of unease that crossed a face when they thought no one was watching. And right now, Judge Langley was giving her plenty to observe. His behavior was unusual, even for someone known for his sternness. He seemed agitated, almost nervous, as if he were carrying some invisible weight on his shoulders. As Maya returned to her seat after being dismissed by the judge, Collins leaned forward slightly, pretending to adjust her bag while keeping her focus on the bench. That's when she noticed it. Judge Langley kept glancing at his desk drawer. Not casually, like someone checking for misplaced papers, but repeatedly, almost obsessively. It was subtle, but to Collins, it stood out like a neon sign. Her instincts kicked into high gear. Why would a judge need to check his desk drawer so often during a routine hearing? What, or who, was making him so uneasy? The more she watched, the more convinced she became that something wasn't right. Years of experience told her not to ignore her gut feelings. Quietly, she pulled out her phone and began recording the proceedings. The camera captured everything: Judge Langley's restless movements, his dismissive tone toward Maya, and those frequent, suspicious glances at the drawer. If nothing else, she figured, having footage could come in handy later. You never knew when evidence might be needed. Then, without warning, Judge Langley abruptly stood up. "This court is in recess," he announced gruffly, his voice cutting through the room like thunder. Without another word, he disappeared through a side door behind the bench. The suddenness of his departure left everyone stunned. Lawyers exchanged puzzled looks, and murmurs rippled through the gallery. Even the bailiff seemed taken aback, hesitating before moving to secure the area. Collins didn't waste a moment. This was her chance to investigate further. Under the pretense of delivering paperwork, a believable cover since plainclothes officers often assisted with administrative tasks, she approached the bench. Her heart pounded as she stepped closer, careful to appear calm and professional. No one questioned her presence. After all, she looked like just another staff member going about her duties. As she reached the desk, she glanced around to ensure no one was paying close attention. Then, slowly, deliberately, she opened the drawer. What she found inside made her blood run cold. Nestled among scattered documents and pens was a small handgun, its metallic surface gleaming faintly under the fluorescent lights. Collins froze for a split second, her mind racing. A weapon in a judge's desk. This wasn't protocol. It was dangerous. She quickly snapped a photo of the gun with her phone, careful not to disturb anything else. Her training screamed at her to act fast, but wisely. Whoever this man was, whatever he was hiding, he was clearly a threat. Collins closed the drawer gently and stepped away, her thoughts spinning. She needed backup, but she also knew time was critical. If Judge Langley returned and realized someone had discovered his secret, things could escalate quickly. Moving swiftly but calmly, she signaled to a nearby security guard and discreetly explained what she had found. Within moments, additional officers were alerted, and the courthouse went on high alert. Meanwhile, Maya remained seated in the gallery, unaware of the chaos unfolding behind the scenes. She replayed the judge's harsh words in her head, trying to steady her emotions. But outside the courtroom doors, tension mounted as law enforcement prepared for the unexpected. Detective Collins' discovery had changed everything, and within minutes, the entire courthouse would learn just how serious the situation really was. The atmosphere in the courthouse shifted dramatically as Detective Sarah Collins moved with quiet urgency. She had already alerted security about the gun in Judge Langley's desk, and now officers were strategically positioning themselves around the courtroom. The once routine hearing had transformed into something far more intense, though most people in the room remained oblivious to the unfolding drama. Maya sat in her seat, still processing the judge's cutting remarks, unaware that the man who had belittled her was now at the center of a potential crisis. Judge Langley reappeared moments later, his expression unreadable as he walked back through the side door and took his place behind the bench. He glanced around the room, perhaps sensing that something was different. The subtle increase in tension wasn't lost on him. His eyes darted toward the bailiffs standing unusually close, their postures tense and alert. For a brief moment, he paused, his hand hovering near the edge of his desk. It was clear he was searching for reassurance, maybe even contemplating whether his secret was safe. Collins didn't wait for him to settle. With evidence in hand and backup ready, she stepped forward confidently, her badge visible as she approached the bench. "Your Honor," she said firmly, her voice steady, but commanding enough to silence any lingering murmurs in the room. All eyes turned to her, including Maya's, who watched from the gallery with growing confusion. What was happening? Why was this woman interrupting the proceedings? Judge Langley's face darkened immediately. "Who are you, and what is the meaning of this intrusion?" he demanded, his tone dripping with indignation. But Collins didn't flinch. Instead, she held up her phone, displaying the photo she had taken of the gun hidden in his desk drawer. "We need to talk about this," she said simply, her words carrying an unspoken weight that silenced the judge mid-sentence. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, a flicker of fear crossed his face. Realizing he was cornered, Judge Langley tried to assert control. "This is outrageous," he bellowed, slamming his hand on the desk. "You have no right to accuse me of anything. I am the authority here." His voice echoed through the courtroom, but instead of intimidating those present, it only deepened the suspicion surrounding him. Spectators exchanged nervous glances, while lawyers whispered urgently among themselves. Even the bailiffs seemed to stiffen further, their hands resting conspicuously close to their holstered weapons. Collins remained calm, unfazed by his outburst. "Sir, we've already secured the area," she replied evenly. "You're not leaving until we get answers." Then, turning slightly to address the bailiffs, she added, "Please escort His Honor away from the bench." The command hung in the air like a challenge, one the judge couldn't ignore. For a split second, it looked as though Judge Langley might resist. His fingers twitched, inching closer to the edge of the desk where the gun lay concealed. But before he could make another move, two burly bailiffs stepped forward, blocking his access to the drawer. "Step aside, Your Honor," one of them instructed, his tone leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, and with obvious resentment, Judge Langley rose from his seat, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. As the bailiffs led him away, the courtroom erupted into chaos. Gasps filled the air, and murmurs turned into full-blown conversations. People craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the disgraced judge being escorted out, his robes billowing behind him like a fallen king stripped of his crown. Maya stared in stunned disbelief, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. The same man who had dismissed her as a nobody mere minutes ago was now being removed in handcuffs, his authority crumbling before everyone's eyes. Detective Collins stood quietly amidst the commotion, her expression unreadable. She knew this was only the beginning. There would be investigations, questions, and consequences, but for now she allowed herself a small sense of satisfaction. Justice, often slow and elusive, had acted swiftly today. And as the reality of the situation sank in, Maya realized something important. Sometimes, the smallest actions could spark monumental change. The courtroom buzzed with disbelief as Judge Richard Langley was led away, his once imposing figure now diminished by the weight of handcuffs and the stares of those he had lorded over for years. For many in the room, it was a surreal moment, watching someone who had wielded so much power be stripped of it in an instant. Maya sat frozen in her seat, her heart pounding as she replayed the scene in her mind. Just moments ago, she had felt small and insignificant under the judge's cutting words. Now she watched him walk out like a criminal, his head bowed but his expression defiant. Detective Sarah Collins took charge of the situation with quiet authority. She signaled to the bailiffs to clear the courtroom, ensuring that only essential personnel remained. Reporters who had been lingering outside caught wind of the commotion and began pressing against the doors, eager for details. The news spread quickly through the courthouse corridors. A sitting judge arrested in his own courtroom. Whispers turned into shouts, and soon, phones were lighting up with texts and calls. Social media erupted with speculation, hashtags trending within minutes as people tried to piece together what had happened. Inside the courtroom, Collins addressed the remaining individuals, including Maya. "This is an active investigation," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the lingering murmurs. "I need everyone to remain calm and cooperate fully." Her eyes landed on Maya for a brief second longer than anyone else's, perhaps recognizing the courage it had taken for her to stand up to such a formidable opponent earlier. Maya nodded silently, still trying to process the whirlwind of emotions coursing through her body. Meanwhile, Judge Langley was taken to a holding area within the courthouse, where officers began questioning him about the gun found in his desk drawer. His initial defiance gave way to frustration as he realized the gravity of the situation. That weapon was for protection, he insisted, his voice rising despite the futility of his protests. "You have no idea what I've been dealing with lately." But his explanations fell flat against the hard evidence stacked against him. Investigators uncovered text messages on his phone hinting at paranoia and possible threats against his life, though nothing justified bringing a firearm into a courtroom, a place meant to symbolize justice and fairness. As the day wore on, Detective Collins worked tirelessly to document every detail of the case. Security footage was reviewed, witness statements collected, and the gun sent off for forensic analysis. Every step of the process was meticulous, leaving no room for doubt or error. By late afternoon, enough evidence had been gathered to formally charge Judge Langley with possession of an illegal firearm and suspected intent to harm. The decision sent shockwaves through the legal community, raising questions about how someone in such a respected position could fall so far. Maya eventually left the courthouse, her thoughts swirling as reporters swarmed around her, shoving microphones in her face and firing questions. "What happened in there?" one asked. "How do you feel about the judge being arrested?" another pressed. Overwhelmed, she pushed past them without comment, her mind racing. She hadn't planned for any of this to happen, yet here she was at the center of a story that would dominate headlines for days to come. Back inside, Detective Collins paused for a moment, reflecting on the events of the day. She had done her job, but she couldn't help feeling a sense of vindication, not just for herself, but for Maya and others like her who had faced injustice in that very courtroom. Justice wasn't always blind, she thought, but sometimes it opened its eyes wide enough to see the truth. And today, it had seen clearly. For Maya, the night ahead promised little rest. As she walked home, the streets lit softly by street lamps, she replayed the judge's words in her mind. "You're nobody." But instead of feeling defeated, she felt something else stirring inside her, a quiet determination. If anything, today proved that even when the odds seemed insurmountable, standing your ground could lead to extraordinary outcomes. The days that followed Judge Langley's arrest were a whirlwind of media attention, public debate, and soul-searching for everyone involved. News outlets couldn't get enough of the story, plastering headlines across every platform. Judge arrested in own courtroom, from gavel to handcuffs, and justice served or system failed. The incident sparked heated discussions about accountability within the legal system. How could someone entrusted with upholding justice bring a weapon into a courtroom? Was this an isolated case of paranoia, or was it symptomatic of deeper issues plaguing the judiciary? For Maya Thompson, life changed overnight. What had started as a routine court appearance turned into a national spotlight she hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. Reporters camped outside her apartment building, eager to capture her reaction. Social media flooded with posts supporting her bravery, while critics questioned if her protest tactics had provoked the judge. Despite the noise, Maya stayed grounded, focusing on what mattered most, the family she had been fighting for long before this unexpected turn of events. She began receiving messages from people all over the country, many sharing their own stories of battling unfair evictions and discriminatory practices. A single mother from Texas wrote to thank her for standing up when no one else would. A retired teacher in Michigan shared how she'd lost her home due to predatory lending and found hope in Maya's courage. Each message reminded Maya why she had started this journey in the first place. This wasn't just about her. It was about giving a voice to those who felt powerless. Meanwhile, an internal investigation into Judge Langley revealed troubling details about his conduct leading up to the arrest. It turned out he had been under scrutiny for months, flagged by colleagues for erratic behavior and allegations of corruption. Financial records showed suspicious transactions linked to property developers tied to illegal eviction cases like Maya's. As more evidence emerged, public outrage grew. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Judges must be accountable," and "No more abuse of power." Maya joined them, standing shoulder to shoulder with community members demanding reform. Detective Sarah Collins became a key figure in the investigation, her role expanding beyond arresting the judge to ensuring transparency throughout the process. She worked closely with ethics committees and law enforcement agencies to uncover any connections between Langley's actions and systemic injustices. Her efforts earned widespread praise, with many calling her a hero for stepping in when it mattered most. For Collins, however, it was simply part of the job, a reminder that justice required vigilance, even in places where it should have thrived naturally. As the weeks passed, Judge Langley's trial began, drawing massive crowds both in person and online. The prosecution painted him as a symbol of unchecked power gone wrong, while his defense argued he was a victim of circumstance, undone by fear and poor judgment. Regardless of the verdict, the damage to his reputation was irreversible. He had become a cautionary tale, a stark example of what happened when authority went unchecked. Through it all, Maya remained steadfast, using her newfound platform to push for meaningful change. She organized rallies, spoke at town halls, and collaborated with activists working toward judicial reform. At one event, she stood before a packed auditorium and addressed the audience with quiet strength. "This isn't just about one judge," she said, her voice steady. "It's about making sure no one feels invisible ever again. We are not nobodies. Our voices matter." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring others to join the fight. People who had once felt powerless now saw themselves in Maya, a woman who refused to back down, even when faced with ridicule and dismissal. From college students organizing teach-ins to seasoned lawyers drafting policy changes, a movement began to take shape, and at its heart was Maya, a symbol of resilience and determination. By the time Judge Langley was convicted on multiple charges, including possession of an illegal firearm and obstruction of justice, the nation was already abuzz with talk of reform. New legislation aimed at increasing transparency in courts gained traction, fueled by grassroots campaigns led by Maya and her allies. Though the road ahead promised challenges, there was a renewed sense of hope. Justice, though flawed, had shown itself capable of self-correction, and Maya knew she had played a small but vital role in making that happen. In the months following Judge Langley's conviction, Maya Thompson emerged as a beacon of hope and resilience. Her story resonated far beyond the courthouse walls, inspiring people from all walks of life to stand up against injustice. The arrest of a sitting judge in his own courtroom had been shocking enough, but what truly captured the nation's attention was the courage of a young black woman who refused to be silenced, even when dismissed as nobody. For Maya, this wasn't just about personal vindication. It was about amplifying the voices of those who had long been ignored. Maya threw herself into advocacy work with renewed energy, determined to turn the momentum of her unexpected fame into tangible change. She traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, universities, and community centers. Her speeches were powerful yet relatable, filled with stories of families struggling to keep their homes and neighborhoods fighting to stay united. She spoke passionately about systemic inequities, calling out policies that disproportionately affected marginalized communities. "Change doesn't come from waiting for someone else to fix things," she often said. "It comes from standing up and saying, 'This isn't right.'" Her message struck a chord, especially among younger generations eager to make a difference. Students organized protests on college campuses, holding mock trials to highlight flaws in the justice system. Activists launched campaigns to educate renters about their rights, distributing flyers and hosting workshops in underserved areas. Even lawmakers took notice, introducing bills aimed at preventing illegal evictions and increasing transparency in housing disputes. One such bill, nicknamed the Maya Act by supporters, sought to create independent oversight boards to review judicial conduct, a direct response to the scandals surrounding Judge Langley. But Maya didn't stop there. Recognizing the importance of storytelling and driving social change, she collaborated with filmmakers and journalists to document the struggles of families impacted by unjust evictions. A short film titled "No Place Like Home" premiered at a prestigious film festival, bringing tears to audiences' eyes as they watched real-life accounts of mothers, fathers, and children forced out of their homes. The film ended with Maya addressing the camera. "Every door closed shouldn't mean another dream shattered. Together, we can build a future where everyone has a place to belong." The ripple effects of Maya's activism reached even the highest levels of government. Lawmakers invited her to testify before Congress, where she delivered a stirring address about the need for comprehensive judicial reform. Her testimony drew standing ovations, and several representatives pledged to prioritize legislation addressing corruption and bias within the legal system. It was a moment of validation, not just for Maya, but for every person who had ever felt powerless in the face of authority. Back home, Maya continued to lead by example. She worked tirelessly alongside local organizations to provide resources for displaced families, securing funding for temporary housing and job training programs. Neighbors began referring to her as the heart of the community, a title she humbly accepted while emphasizing that true progress required collective effort. "I'm just one person," she told reporters during an interview. "Real change happens when we all come together." As time went on, Maya's influence extended beyond policy changes and protests. She became a mentor to young activists, teaching them how to navigate systems designed to resist change. Through workshops and online platforms, she shared strategies for organizing effectively, staying resilient in the face of adversity, and using media to amplify their causes. Many credited her guidance with helping them find their footing in the fight for justice. By the end of the year, Maya's name was synonymous with grassroots activism and unwavering determination. Awards poured in, from humanitarian honors to keys to cities, but Maya remained focused on the bigger picture. To her, accolades were secondary to the lives being transformed because of the movement she helped ignite. Every family who kept their home, every child who stayed in school, and every community that stood stronger together was proof that her efforts mattered. And yet Maya knew the fight was far from over. While significant strides had been made, systemic injustices still loomed large. But she faced the road ahead with optimism, buoyed by the knowledge that she wasn't alone. Across the nation, people inspired by her story were rising up, demanding accountability and equity. As Maya often reminded herself, and others, change might take time, but every step forward counted. And she was ready to keep walking, no matter how long the journey. Months later, Maya Thompson stood on a brightly lit stage at a gala honoring grassroots leaders who had made extraordinary contributions to their communities. The room was filled with hundreds of people, activists, lawmakers, journalists, and ordinary citizens, all gathered to celebrate the power of collective action. A giant screen behind her displayed images from her journey. Protests in the streets, families holding hands outside their homes, and Maya herself speaking passionately into a microphone. As she looked out at the sea of faces, she felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, pride, and an unshakable determination to keep pushing forward. The MC introduced her with glowing words, calling her a voice for the voiceless and a catalyst for change. When it was finally her turn to speak, Maya took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium. She smiled warmly, scanning the audience before beginning. "A year ago," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "I walked into a courtroom feeling like I didn't belong. I was called a nobody by someone who thought his title gave him the right to decide my worth. But today, I stand here knowing that none of us are nobodies. Every single person in this room, and beyond, has value. Every story matters." Her words resonated deeply, earning enthusiastic applause. She went on to share how far they had come since that fateful day in court. "We've seen laws change, corrupt systems exposed, and communities empowered to fight back," she continued. "But let's not forget why we started this journey. It wasn't for awards or recognition. It was for the mother working 2 jobs so her kids could have a better life. It was for the elderly man fighting to stay in the home he built with his own hands. It was for every child who deserves stability and safety." Maya paused, letting her words sink in. Then, with quiet intensity, she added, "This isn't just my story, it's ours. Each of you has played a part in creating a world where justice is more than a word written in law books, where fairness isn't a privilege reserved for a few, but a right guaranteed to all." As she wrapped up her speech, Maya raised her fist, a symbol of solidarity and strength, and invited everyone in the room to join her. One by one, fists rose across the auditorium, a powerful reminder of unity and purpose. The gesture brought tears to some eyes, while others cheered loudly, moved by the shared commitment to continue the fight. After the event, Maya mingled with attendees, many of whom thanked her for inspiring them to take action in their own lives. A young woman approached her, clutching a notebook filled with ideas for starting a local advocacy group. "I never thought I could make a difference," she admitted shyly. "But hearing your story made me realize that even small steps can lead to big changes." Maya smiled warmly, placing a hand on the woman's shoulder. "That's exactly how it starts," she replied. "One step at a time. And when enough of us move together, we become unstoppable." Later that night, as Maya reflected on the evening, she thought about the road ahead. There were still battles to be fought, laws to reform, prejudices to dismantle, and hearts to change. But she no longer felt daunted by the challenges. Instead, she felt hopeful, knowing she wasn't alone. Across the country, people inspired by her story were standing up, speaking out, and refusing to back down. In the months that followed, Maya continued to champion justice, always remembering the lessons she had learned along the way. She taught others to embrace resilience, to find strength in vulnerability, and to believe in the power of community. Her legacy wasn't defined by one moment in a courtroom or one victory against a corrupt judge. It was rooted in the countless lives she touched and the movements she helped ignite. And so, Maya kept moving forward, driven by the belief that true change came not from titles or positions, but from the courage to say, "Enough is enough." For her, there was no greater honor than being part of something bigger than herself, a movement fueled by love, hope, and the unyielding pursuit of justice.